Have you ever felt like you're meant for more, but at the same time, you don't fully trust yourself to get there? Like you have big goals, big dreams, big ambitions, but behind closed doors, you overthink everything, you compare yourself constantly, and you question whether or not you're actually capable of achieving any of these things that you want to do. And listen, I get it, okay? You're versatile, it's serving Dichotomy. It's probably fucking exhausting. Because on one hand, you're ambitious. You want growth, you want expansion, you want impact. But on the other hand, you don't fully believe that you deserve it. And I think a lot of times nobody talks about this comparison. We hear a lot about confident people or insecure people. But what if you're a mix of the both? The ambitious overthinker, the high standard self-doubter, the people who want a really big life but don't really trust themselves to get it. If that's you, then you're in the right place. Because today I'm going to be breaking down why insecurity does not cancel out ambition, why most high achievers start when they feel insecure, and I'm going to give you 3 major shifts that start to build self-trust so that all that ambition you have starts to feel like direction instead of just a ton of pressure that you don't know what to do with. Because the truth is, it's not that you lack confidence, it's that you lack trust in yourself to follow through. And that's a very different problem. Let me break down the psychology. Ambition is a vision for your future self, where insecurity is distrust in your current self. It's that I want more, but I don't believe I'm capable of more. And so it creates this tension, it creates this discomfort between the ambitious you and who you want to be and the insecure you about who you currently are. And that internal conflict can either push you to grow or it can keep you stuck in paralysis and perfectionism, overthinking, and comparison. If you're someone who wants to level up mentally, physically, and emotionally, but you're tired of feeling like your own biggest obstacle, you're in the right place. And if you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button because we talk twice a week about building stronger minds, stronger bodies, and most importantly, building stronger self-trust. Because you don't need to become a different person to get to where you want to go. You just need to become someone who follows through. Let's get into this.
Welcome to the Mindset Gym podcast, where we exercise your way of thinking to help unlock your hidden potential. I'm your host, Emily Irwin, a registered nurse and holistic nutritionist with a passion for all things health, fitness, and personal development. All right, let's get into it.
Welcome back to the Mindset Gym podcast. Today we're talking about the people who are struggling on the fence of ambition and insecurity. The people who want more for their life, the people who see a vision of what their future self could be, but the people who also feel stuck in paralysis because they don't trust themselves to take the steps to actually get there. And that internal contradiction is exhausting. That conflict between the vision of your future self and the distrust of your current self can be explained by the self-discrepancy theory. And this theory was coined by Edward Torrey Higgins. Higgins found that the psychological discomfort comes from the gap between the actual self and the ideal self. So the actual self is who you see yourself as today, who you currently are, and the ideal self is who you want to be. So that's that ambitious future self. And so you get this tension between these two people because they're not in the same position. They don't line up. There is a gap to be filled between who you currently are and the person that you're trying to become. And the feelings that often arise from the tension in this gap are things like anxiety, self-doubt, shame, and insecurity. And it can be really easy to get stuck in those feelings and never actually take the steps to become your ideal self because you're so stuck spiraling in who your actual self is. But this is actually a really good thing. This tension exists because you have a vision for your future self. This tension exists because you're someone who's ambitious. If you didn't have any ambition, if you didn't strive to be a better version of yourself than you currently are, this tension wouldn't exist because there wouldn't be a gap. So the discomfort you're feeling is not proof that you're broken. It's just proof that you have a vision for a better version of you in the future. And the bigger the gap between who you are and the person that you want yourself to be, the bigger that tension is going to feel. And I think sometimes we get confused by this because if you have a really huge gap between your actual self and your ideal self, it's going to create a lot of those feelings of anxiety and insecurity and self-doubt. And it's going to feel like you're not capable of actually going from one to the other. But that gap, that tension, and the feelings that arise from it do not cancel out your capability to actually achieve the thing. And if anything, they may actually be a sign that you're more capable than you think. And this can be explained by something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. coined by David Dunning and Dunning-Kruger. And this is that notion that people with really low skill often overestimate their ability, while people who have really high skill and really high ability to actually achieve the things tend to doubt themselves more. And the reason for that is because when you have a higher amount of knowledge and a higher amount of skills, you also have a higher amount of awareness for the things that you don't know. It's that common notion of the more you learn, the dumber you feel, because you become more aware of the gaps in your knowledge. Whereas if you don't know any of this stuff to begin with, ignorance is bliss, right? You don't see the gaps, you don't see the things to be insecure about, and so you actually overestimate your ability. So the fact that you're in this position in the first place and you're doubting yourself and you're swimming in insecurity can actually mean that you are one of the most capable people for achieving the thing that you're wanting to achieve. That insecurity that you're feeling is really just a result of your own self-awareness and your own high standards, which is a good thing. And in some cases, your insecurity can actually be a source of fuel for getting you where you want to be. It's that notion of wanting to prove yourself or wanting to prove something to somebody else. And so you push harder, you work harder, you try anything you can in order to reach that end goal because you feel this sense of insecurity that you're trying to remedy by proving something. And because the insecurity is not actually coming from a confidence issue, it's coming from a self-trust issue, the way that we lean into this and use it as fuel to push you forward is by putting steps in place to build that trust and reinforce the narrative that you are someone who's actually able to become that future version of yourself that you see. This is where I'm going to get into the 3 shifts that I want you to implement that are going to change the way that you look at this. It's going to change that insecurity, that discomfort, that tension that you feel, and it's going to help give you some direction to get you where you actually want to go. Because we can be ambitious and insecure. It does not mean that we're not capable of reaching that end goal. And the first shift that I want you to lean into is stop trying to feel confident and just focus on acting consistently. Confidence is a byproduct of you doing the thing over and over again and gaining experience and gaining trust in yourself. Not only that you are someone who shows up and does it repeatedly, but trust in your ability to do so. I want you to think about anything that you've done in your life. Let's say when you were a kid, you played an instrument. For me, it was piano and violin. When you first started playing that instrument, when you went to your first music lesson and you played that instrument for the very first time, it probably sounded pretty terrible. I know I did when I started. I feel a little bit bad for my parents having to listen to me practice the violin in the early stages because I'm sure it just sounded like a shrieking cat. But you don't have any confidence in your ability in that moment because you haven't done it, right? You haven't mastered that skill yet. You haven't put the reps in. So you feeling confident in your ability to play that instrument is not going to come by you just saying affirmations about it in the mirror, or by thinking about it, or by watching a million videos on how to play the violin or how to play the piano. You getting confident in playing that instrument is going to come from you playing that instrument over and over and over again, and getting a little bit better, and learning all the warm-ups, and learning all the notes, and learning how to read the sheet music. And then because you've put the reps in, because you've done it consistently, the byproduct of that is that you feel confident. And the same goes for the goals that you're trying to achieve, the ambitions that you have about your life. The things that you're trying to do are not going to be things that you feel confident doing right away. You are going to have to show up and do them first before you feel confident in your ability to do so. And so that insecurity that you're feeling right at the beginning is very normal. Really what that is just a signal that you are at the beginning of your journey. Insecurity is expected. In fact, it's, as Mel Robbins likes to say, the mentally healthy response. And this entire notion can be supported by Albert Bandura's self-efficacy theory. His research in self-efficacy shows that your belief in your ability to do something comes from what he calls mastery experiences. Mastery experiences are repeated small follow-through moments. So those repeated moments where you do the thing, you learn a little bit, you get a little bit better, you show up and you do it again. Those are mastery experiences. And so you doing those over and over again is what is going to solidify that belief in yourself. And that brings us to shift number 2, which is separating your self-worth from your performance. If you are the person who is very ambitious but also very insecure, and you actually do choose to take some steps towards becoming the person that you want to become, this is going to be a very common roadblock that if you don't address it can cause you to derail your progress entirely, and that is tying your self-worth with the outcomes. The mindset is often, if I succeed, I'm valuable, or I'm capable, or I'm worthy. And on the flip side of this, if I fail, I'm behind, I'm a loser, I can't do it. You put so much emotion and so much weight into the outcomes that the moment you hit a negative outcome, you scrap the plan altogether because it reinforces the narrative to you that you're not capable of doing what you want to do. And so one of the necessary steps that you're going to have to take in order to pursue what you're trying to pursue long term is separating the emotion from that and separating what it says about you. The results along your journey are not a verdict about who you are. It doesn't say whether or not you're capable of actually achieving this thing in the future. Failure is actually just part of the process. Bumps in the road, just part of the process. That's how you learn. That's how you get a little bit better. That's how you lean into those mastery experiences, right? Going back to our example of learning an instrument when you were a kid, if there were no bumps in that road, if you never encountered a new music note that you didn't recognize or a piece of sheet music that was really difficult to play. I remember an example for me when I was playing the violin. It's been a little while since I've done it, so don't quote me on this if you are a violin player, but when I was trying to learn how to play the really high note where you have to like stretch your pinky down the line a little bit, I found that really hard to do, and so that was something I really had to focus on for a long period of time in order to get that note. I think it's an E. I don't know. Anyways, the thing is, you're gonna have to fail because that's how you get better, right? In order for you to actually reach the end goal that you're trying to reach, it's going to require you to get better and level up along the way, and you're not going to be able to do that unless you encounter obstacles. So this is where I want you to reframe your thinking, and I want you to start seeing failures as part of the process and a necessary part of the process, because then when you encounter them, it will become less of a verdict on who you actually are and merely just a function of what you're trying to do, right? You're able to look at it a little more logically instead of taking it as a blunder on your personality and a signal that you should just throw in the towel. And the last shift that I want you to lean into is getting comfortable being uncomfortable. That insecurity, that tension, that self-doubt that you're feeling is going to make you want to shrink, but your ambition requires you to expand. You have to push yourself out of that comfort zone in order to get where you're trying to go. Growth is going to come from repeated exposure to uncomfortable things. This ties into the previous shift that we talked about, where failure is a necessary part of you learning. On a similar vein, discomfort is necessary for you to adapt. You're not going to be able to become that end product that you're trying to be if you don't expose yourself to some discomfort. You're never going to have a moment where you feel 100% confident. You're never going to have a moment where you feel 100% ready. There's never going to be a perfect time. You're not going to become confident and then suddenly start taking action. You're going to have to lean into that insecurity that you're feeling and lean into that discomfort that you're feeling and start putting in the reps anyways. Because in you doing that, you're going to build up that self-trust and you're going to start shifting the way that you look at yourself. And suddenly the tension between your actual self and your ideal self is going to start lessening. The gap between those two identities is going to start to shrink. And it's going to feel a lot easier for you to actually become that person one day. Because you're taking the steps that show you that you can do it. So I'm going to give you 3 really practical steps that you can take in order to put these shifts in thinking into practice. The first one is I want you to pick one small promise that you can keep to yourself every single day and just make that your focus for the next little while. Maybe a few weeks, maybe a couple of months. The main goal is just for you to focus on repeatedly keeping that promise to yourself. And this doesn't have to be anything major. It doesn't even have to be anything related to whatever version of you you're trying to build. It could be making your bed in the morning. It could be turning your phone off in the evenings or not having it in the bedroom with you. It could be not drinking alcohol on certain days of the week. It could be drinking a glass of water as soon as you wake up. Something small that you think you can follow through on a regular basis. The point here is not to create some crazy habit change. The point here is to reinforce the narrative that you are someone who's reliable, and that builds up that self-trust. So make that your focus. Just pick one thing that you can stick to and follow through on that. If you find that difficult to do, a shift that I like to think about is approaching it as if it's a promise you made to somebody else. Because I think a lot of the time we have an easier time following through on those promises than we do on the ones we made to ourselves. But Unfortunately, the promises you make to yourself are actually the most important ones, and they're the ones that are going to move the needle most over the long term if you are actually willing to follow through on them consistently. The second one is I want you to speak to yourself like someone that you're responsible for, like someone that you're taking care of, someone whose entire existence depends on you. Because it does. But I want you to talk to yourself as if you're a third person in that position. Because it's a lot easier to give advice to somebody that's not us. And so we can speak to ourselves much more logically and thoughtfully about the things we're trying to do when we view it through the lens of somebody else that we're taking care of. And the last one that I want you to lean into is doing one small thing that makes you uncomfortable. Maybe it's posting that thing on social media that you drafted weeks ago and never actually got the courage to post. Maybe it's speaking up in that meeting that you always go to raise your hand in, but then you don't quite do it. Maybe it's applying for that job. You know, the one you screenshot the posting of and then didn't do anything about it for days? Maybe go and apply for that job. Even if you don't feel like you're 100% qualified, lean into the discomfort and do it anyway. The goal here is not to become someone who's confident. The goal here is to become someone who follows through. As a byproduct of that, the confidence will come. Being ambitious and insecure does not mean that you're broken. It just means that you see potential in yourself that you haven't quite grown into yet. And the gap between who you are and where you want to be, that is built through consistency, repetition, and self-trust. Just because you don't feel capable right now does not mean that you're not. That ideal self that you have is going to be your actual self one day. Start leaning into that. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.
Hey, thanks for listening to the show. If you like the episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review, or share the show with a friend. Your support helps the show reach even more incredible people just like you. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time at the Mindset Gym.